Today we're going to restore a Philips Paladin 372 tube radio. This radio is from 1957-1958, so it's old. And as you can see, it consists of two halves. This is the receiver and preamp section. This is the power supply and power amplifier section. Power amplifier is a big word. It uses an EL95 tube that gives off 2 watts at best, but still makes enough noise to be heard. Now this radio, I bought that because it is a special version of the one that I already had, which I showed you in an earlier video, restored and everything. As you can see, this is the same radio, but it's only one complete section. Here they kind of split that up to give more degrees of freedom when building this into a vehicle, when mounting it. This obviously smaller section would be at the dashboard. The power supply section can be tucked away and split from the receiver section. So basically more degrees of freedom than the older model, but electronically they're virtually the same, with the exception of the tubes used. The one that I already restored uses rim-lock tubes. This one uses no-valve tubes, which are more modern. Modern is a big word, of course. We're talking 50-60 years ago. But nevertheless, Philips did that probably to protect itself from obsolescence. So I'm gonna start repairing, restoring, figuring out what's wrong with it, and then we'll continue the video with the results. Okay, let's see how the radio performs.
En la Miguel Solís, sistema informativo de la radio cubana.
Radio Cuba.
Need Indeed. Answer a job, and you'll immediately get a list of quality candidates.
Fox News.
Resumes on Indeed match.
Can be the demand at Sarasota County app.
And that's, you know, so it's asked, what's the greatest commandment?
What's the oldies channel?
And this fallout
this is
that's taking place. One thing I know about Philadelphia,
channel.
The fans hold.
This Friday, I literally drive right by.
The Chinese government has tortured Muslims, forcibly.
666.
Muslims were fasting.
A este acercamiento al maravilloso mundo del deporte les saluda como siempre Juan
Massage Envy. A little help keeping the body working. Discover all the wellness benefits.
Don't know what that is, but it's pretty strong.
Los ha bloqueado por todos lados. De pronto, de repente.
En su comentario cultural se refiere a la creación.
Coincidental. Drop 6 in a row. They got the Red Sox coming in
This is
tomorrow.
the same
Let's
sports
call
channel
up
on
Wanda
another
Franco
transmitter.
in time for that series.
Farther away, I guess.
Coincidences.
6-inch shutout. Nothing at Wrigley Field, denying the Fish the 3-game sweep. They're off today.
We got some lightning in the air. It's not too bad. It's still early. Later in the day, it will become almost impossible to listen to this,
We didn't know who to talk to about it.
because we are in the lightning capital of the United States.
Connected my cruise industry. For reference, he says.
Works very nice. I had to do a couple of repairs. One of the things, of course, the vibrator was shot. We put a a new one in there, the Payco vibrator. This latest version is actually reverse polarity protected. So if I turn around, this is the current, a little bit more than 1.5 amp at 12 volts. If I reverse the polarity, what will happen is only the filaments will draw current now. They're of course polarity independent. The vibrator will not kick in. It won't run, but it won't die either. It is reverse polarity protected, this version. And here you can see what kind of current we have from just the tubes. It is a little bit more than, well, it's about 0.65 amps from just the tubes. If I add, now we are at 1.65, so the difference is the HT power supply. Works quite nice. Like I said, I had to do a couple of repairs, not just the vibrator. Capacitors had to be replaced, quite a lot actually. Resistors in this model were better than the other Philips radio that I have a video for. They were of better quality, so I did not have to replace too many of those, 2 to be exact. But capacitors were all shot. These are the capacitors WIMA. They are the ones that the German Philips used. They are slightly better than the tar caps that the Dutch Philips uses, but they were shot nevertheless. So that's really all replaced. So it's basically done. I also had to replace the dial string. That obviously goes, but I kind of closed it up. It is in better shape than the other one. I do have the front cover. It's not visible here, but I'll show you it later in this video when the thing is all ready to go. One thing I did have to change, I first had it connected with this, you know, BNC converter, but the radio didn't like that. It loads the front end too much, and you have no more selectivity, so lots of image frequencies are breaking through. The adapter that I now made came from the manual, an antenna adapter that was actually described in the manual for test purposes. This converts the 50 ohms from the outside antenna to high impedance that the radio is set. That's really what the radio wants to see, and then the front end selectivity is still there. Here's the diagram for this Paladin radio. It is a more modern version of the other one that I showed you in the other video. This is the version. It has Noval tubes, as they're called, 9-pin tubes. ECH81, EF89, EBF80 and EL95 as the audio output tube. You can see it also. And the older version had Rimlock tubes, ECH42, EF41, EAF42 and EL42. For the rest, the design is very similar. But Philips Germany decided to use the more modern tubes to avoid obsolescence issues, I would assume. Now, as I said, I had to replace quite a lot. These capacitors here, for instance, C14. The problem with those is they are all in this potted aluminum block. And as you can see, C13, C20, C19 and C14 are high voltage bypass capacitors, and they were all leaky and they had to be replaced. So I had to take this whole thing out, put new caps in and repot it with some tube part filler. The other, this is a notorious capacitor, C22. When you have radios like these, not just this one, but any tube radio, this will always be the problem. Trying to find my diagram here. This is that capacitor, C22. So what happens is, as you can see, it is a pass-through capacitor to couple the audio driver to the audio PA. So here we have plate voltage, which is high. Here we have grid voltage, control grid voltage, which is negative, minus 8 volt. And if this thing gets leaky, then the control grid will slowly turn positive, and the current in this PA tube will increase tremendously. And then a number of things can happen. If the current goes up high enough, this audio output transformer can burn out, or the power supply transformer can burn out, or, which is most likely, the vibrator goes out. And that's exactly what had happened in my radio. This thing had gotten so hot that all these solder joints here internally had come loose, and then the radio obviously stopped, almost like a fuse. So this is one thing you have to look out for any vintage radio. These pass-through, these coupling capacitors that couple the driver to the PA, if they go bad, and they always do after 50-60 years, then a whole bunch of chain reaction can happen with a whole bunch of defects. So that one is the first one you got to look at, and the symptoms are that the radio is drawing way too much current. When I had thrown out this mechanical vibrator for the solid state vibrator, it did work, but I noticed right away that the current was very high that it was drawing, and that is an indicator that this particular one is bad. And then, like I said, all the ones that are potted in that aluminum case that I showed you were also bad. That is, for instance, the screen grid, the coupling cap C19, and there is more of these high voltage. For the rest, it actually worked pretty nice. The resistors had not drifted like we had in the other one, and the radio works quite well once all that is fixed. The other ones that are that were busted are these capacitors here. Those are basically capacitors that are needed to limit the noise from the switching regulator. Not regulator, power supply. It's basically a DC-DC converter, and that causes noise from the square waves that are being generated. And the other one that was gone is this one here, 0.47. That was gone, and another one is here, C26, which is a high voltage capacitor of 0.1 microfarad. That one was also busted. So as you see, when you fix these radios, capacitors is your biggest problem, but resistors can be the problem too, as I showed you in the other video. But for this one, that was remarkably okay. Alright, quick look on the actual radio. Here is that a block with the capacitors, the 4 capacitors that I had to remove and put new one in. This is the notorious pass-through capacitor for the that couples the audio driver with the PA. That had to be replaced. Then of course we have the ones in the power supply that I showed you. These are all replaced. And then of course there is the vibrator. You can't see it, but there is now a solid state vibrator in there. So another thing I actually had to replace was this potentiometer. That was gone. I bought a new one on eBay that had a decent on-off switch. Problem is, it was one with a very long drive shaft, so I had to buy one of those little coupling connectors to extend this part to the point where it has that same original long drive shaft again. That had to be replaced, of course. The paint is pretty good. I don't think I'm gonna repaint this one. This is the cover for the PA/power supply. It's in decent shape. This is the cover for the receiver exciter. It looks pretty nice. So this one is in a lot better condition than the other one was. I don't have to do too much restoring here. It was basically just a repair. That's kind of nice. And here we have the, that is in very good shape still. Philips Paladin 372 is what goes here, and we'll put that there when it's all put together again. So this was actually slightly easier repair. Label is still good too, I don't have to redo that, and it works quite well now that it is repaired. Okay, we got the bezel on it. Looks quite nice. It's still in very good shape, this bezel. There is no corrosion on it. Like I said, this radio
It hurts a little bit.
is in much better condition than the one I restored earlier. Didn't have to do too much work on this one. Looks nice. Let's put the covers on it, and we're basically done. Alright, we got the cover replaced. This is the receiver and preamp section, audio preamp. We got the bezel on it, we got better knobs for it. And here we have the power supply and PA. Speaker output here. And this is one way that it could be mounted in a car. This obviously at the dashboard, this a little bit tucked away in the back. Or if it's a car that allows for more space, you can join these two halves, make it look like the other radio I showed you, and put it all in at once. For that, to join these two halves, the manufacturer supplied these brackets which connects them together, joins them together, and turns it into a single unit. Let's do that, show you what it looks like. We got the two halves joined together, and it's now basically one unit. Of course, we got this interconnect cable that is not detachable, so that will always be visible. But as you can see, it is all working out well. It's kind of funny, the serial number you see there, 10085. I just found out that it's actually punched into the metal as well, so that makes it nicely authentic. And that's our car radio, 1958. Why is this thing not? There we go. 1958. The other video that I showed you earlier had this model, which cannot be split. It is one unit, but as I showed you before, the insides are practically the same, with the big difference that this one uses the rim lock tubes, where this one uses the no-valve tubes, the 9-pin tubes. So this one is of older vintage, and otherwise practically the same. So Philips must have done a follow-up design to make it easier to give more degrees of freedom when mounting this into a vehicle. I like the front of this one a bit more, the Paladin 372. They did a nice job on that. This looks very early 50s. But that's actually what makes it, what gives its character, personality. And that was it. Let's turn it on quickly to make sure it still works. Alright, hooked up, ready to go. You can see the current as it develops when I turn it on. First we see the filament current, and then as the tubes warm up, this is tube section number 1. Here the second and last tube is warmed up, and we are at a little bit over 1.5 amps. And we obviously should put an antenna in it. There we go.
I watched him like he's an NBA player catching.
Still works good. Receiver has good sensitivity.
Tampa Bay's News Radio, WFLA.
Lots of lighting in the air.
Violent crime.
The overpays.
1.5.
The overpays are plus 350.
Sheeman and Shepherd.
305. 813-305-3000. QC Kinetics. 305-3000.
Works good. Fully restored. I did not have to repaint it, not have to refinish it. This one was in much nicer condition than the other one that I restored. And it works just as good now, better than new. Thank you for watching this. The Philips Paladin 372.